Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Cabrera. I'm here at Samson Properties in the Kensington office. Just wanted to discuss with you guys today about negotiations. That's our topic for today in this seminar. I really hope that you would pick up some stuff here that you could use for your business, and that's the whole idea behind everything that we're doing here at Samson Properties, being able to actually grow everybody's business. So let's begin. Negotiation is something that I've been working on or working with since I started in 1994. I got into the real estate business around that time. And everything in our lives revolves around some type of negotiation. We don't even realize it. We don't call it that all the time. But negotiation is part of our life in one way or another. We're either negotiating over trying to find information, or we're negotiating towards a scenario that we can obtain. If you look back in your life, I'm sure you're going to come across situations where you're negotiating, maybe even negotiating for your salary or negotiating for a job. Job interviews are considered sometimes a negotiation scenario. Or most of the time negotiation is part of it. So it's very important to actually know some aspects of negotiation that will benefit you. And the purpose of this training today, or the purpose of this seminar, is to be able to give you tools to work with and understanding exactly what and how and why would someone go your direction or go your way, or being able to be persuasive or actually being able to, so negotiation doesn't necessarily actually is a compromise. And I wouldn't look at negotiation as a compromise. A lot of the times people think it this way. But if you become really good at what you do, it's not really a compromise. It's more of a persuasion or influence scenario. So when we're dealing with our clients in the listing or in the sales side, you have to understand, in order for you to actually get really good at what you do in the business, you have to be able to negotiate all across the different players or all across the different people that are actually in that in the process. And one of them actually is you're going to be looking at, let's say, if you're going to be a buyer's agent, you're going to be negotiating your commission, or you actually have negotiated something with the buyer. With how you're going to get paid. So if you're dealing with investors, sometimes I get paid by the investor. I don't always get paid by the MLS, or how the whole system works on that side. So negotiation is very critical in terms of being able to know exactly the push and pulls of it. So we'll get to the subject now and looking at it from a joint problem-solving project. This is the best approach that I've seen that worked. When you're dealing with your buyers, you can never make them feel that you're adversarial with them or towards them. Or sometimes they feel like you're actually working for the seller when you're really working for them. So you have to be more of an advocate to them. So being able to do that, the number one thing that you have to understand is you have to separate the emotion from the problem. The biggest issues that most people have is they go toe-to-toe with their clients emotionally. As a professional, you need to be able to separate your emotions from the situation that you're in. The clients can be very abrasive. The clients can insult you, put you down. It can actually tell you how terrible you are as a person, personally insult you, and even sometimes insult your whole family, or if they happen to know your family. So you have to be able to understand the basis of why they're saying those things. So it's very important that you focus on the why of the person that actually is on the other side, who you're actually, if it's an adversarial scenario, you have to be able to pay attention and really listen to what they're trying to explain to you to understand where they're coming from. So perspective is a very, very important thing. You have to be able to put yourself in their shoes. This is one of the things I always tell my trainees, the people I'm training, is that when you're working with people, you have to understand that people make decisions, and irrational decisions based on their emotions. And then it becomes more and more rational when they put logic behind their decisions. So you have to be able to separate that emotion in order for you to be able to find a solution for your clients. So that's very, very important. I get that all the time. People ask me, the other day actually, I had one of my agents ask me, like, Mark, can you come over? I'm having a situation with my my client. They're very upset, and he didn't know how to actually handle it. And the way I handled it when I showed up there is the first thing is find out exactly why they're feeling the way they're feeling. See, you got to get to the emotional side of the reasoning behind why a client would actually, want to say something like, oh, I want to actually sue you, or I want to actually go after you, I want to actually, I want to get this, and that. Find out why, and why are they feeling the way they're feeling. That's so, I can never focus on that more than being able to really understand the position. So I had an example on the listing side. I presented an offer one time, and the property was actually listed around $315,000, and we offered somewhere around $290,000. And it was, it's a huge amount, and it wasn't in this market. But what's interesting about it is understanding where the client is in the position where they were is very important. So for me to actually be able to get the best for my clients is for me to actually play off of that emotion of what they have. So their biggest insecurity is possibly paying 2 mortgages. So based on that, basically, when I presented the offer, I mentioned to them, listen, we can relieve that, that scenario where you might be paying two mortgages by closing sooner. But my client needs this, and my client needs, seller contribution. My client needs all these things. And in the beginning, the other agent actually, I don't know if she was new or not, but she sat down with her client in front of me, which was the weirdest thing. And she started talking to them about possibly giving a counter offer, which what most people think, it's actually a technical situation when you're negotiating. So you listen to the person, you actually you give your position, and then basically they will counter, and then you will counter, and this is basically what most people do when thinking of negotiation. But I didn't do any of that. All I did is actually I waited for that offer to actually come back with a higher amount, and I think they offered 305 or something like that. And I used the whole psychology of silence. So I received that counter offer, and I looked at it, and I must have sat there, for a good 3 to 5 minutes, just really, really quiet, because I was waiting for them to actually get to the point of insecurity, that they're so insecure about what they actually sent back to me. And when they spoke, they said, well, is there anything wrong with the contract? Of course, I was looking at it, staring at it for 3 minutes or 5 minutes. They're like, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with the contract. So what's wrong with the contract? And then I looked at them and I said, and by the way, that's another thing. You got to keep in mind, whoever speaks first when everything is quiet, usually the one who loses. If you're looking at winner or loser, it's nothing to do with that, more of psychological losing. So when they actually brought that up, I said to them, well, I don't know if I can even move my client even an inch at this point. So I'm going to have to, I spent 3 hours trying to convince them to actually write this offer. And this is the best that I know they can do. So, let me just, I'll see what I could do. See if I can make it work. The whole time I maintain the type of relationship that you would maintain with someone to keep it calm and friendly. So that's another thing you got to keep in mind. During that whole time, I was very nice and friendly with the listing agent. I even actually praised her about how good she was as an agent, and actually did the same thing with the seller, how nice that they spend the time to sit down, because most sellers don't. So it's very important that you build that rapport with the people that you're talking to. You could be assertive about what you want, but you don't need to be aggressive in terms of how you approach. If you look at this as a friendly communication where you're actually more of like colleagues that are trying to resolve a situation, like I said, like a joint problem solving session, then the other party will be more open to ideas that you can set out. And that leads me to the other thing that you actually have to keep in mind. You established a mutually agreed upon standard of evaluating the solutions, which means you and the other person will come up with scenarios where it's beneficial for both, or creating a scenario that there's a certain, okay, cannot go below this or cannot go above this. So then all parties feel like they're actually getting what they want. Remember one thing when we're looking at this negotiation scenario, it's perception. Perception, the way you actually perceive something is what becomes your reality. It doesn't mean that it's real reality. So just like when you're negotiating your listing, let's say your listing commission, sometimes I get clients that tells me, oh, Mark, why would I hire you when you actually can pay somebody 4%? I mean, I can go with Redfin and actually list this property. And what I tell them is I give them an analogy usually of, okay, well, I understand. I mean, first of all, I acknowledge their position. It's very important that you acknowledge their position. So what I tell them is like, I understand why you would be feeling that way, because I would be feeling the same way. If I want to buy a car, I want to buy the cheapest car for the value that, the best value I can get. It's always going to be the same way. I understand, because we want to actually get the best value. But it comes with a price, when you actually pay small. A lot of the times you might not be able to get the best person who can negotiate the best price for you. So on average, and I tell them, and I even show them on statistics, I can actually get, like 5% more than a lot of the agents out there on listings or scenarios where if you have the stats. Now, if you don't have the stats to back it up, then you mention to them, it's the quality of the agent that makes a difference. So if an agent cannot even negotiate their commission, right? What makes you think that they can negotiate a better price for you, or the best price that you can get for the home? So you kind of look at that same analogy as when you go to a grocery store and you find milk, right? And you got milk for like $2 and you got milk for $4. And it's the same amount of gallons, the same amount of everything, but one is organic, one is not. Well, guess what? You're paying 6% because, I'm technically organic. That's basically what you're seeing when you're going to a grocery store. You got the quality of the thing that you have, and 80% you might be able to get away, even 90% of the time might be able to get away with actually the cheap milk, right? But the 10% is what gets you, because people don't realize when things hit the fan and you don't have the right agent on your transaction, right? Your transaction fails, and then it becomes more headache and it costs more money. Because every month that property is vacant, that you're not being able to actually sell that property, then what happens? It's costing you more money. So in a way, you're trying to save money. In another way, it's end up costing you more. And I'm sure you've had that situation happen in your lives at some point where you bought something cheap and it actually gave you cheap results. This is basically what you're hiring. You're hiring the best person to be able to sell your home, and that's the reason why I charge what I charge. So, and that's how you have to position yourself. And then once you actually make your statement, stay quiet. Wait for the other party, not only to respond, but also to actually reflect on themselves to see if it's actually a good situation for them, or if they feel insecure about certain things, or they're not sure about something, or they're not sure about whether or not they actually want to hire somebody else. So what you want to do is you make your statement why you are the best person for that situation, whether it's a listing or being the buyer agent, or actually, negotiating with another agent, why they would want to pay more money for the property. So it makes a huge difference. So looking at it, the book that I would recommend actually is Getting to Yes by Roger Fisher and William Ury. That's a good start, because that's where actually the modern negotiating techniques is at this point. But there's certain things that have changed that I wouldn't do in terms of how that book actually teaches you, and one of them is the whole win-win scenario. In certain situation, there's only one win, is when your client wins. Because there's no other way your loan is going to get through if you're working with a buyer, or there's no way your seller can actually buy another house if you don't sell at a certain price. So there's only one direction it has to go. So for you to be able to do that, it's not necessarily going to be a win-win. You can create a perception of win-win. That's the key to that win-win idea. It's an idea. It's not necessarily the actuality. Because, you know, put it this way, certain things in life when you're negotiating, there's no halfway. Either you get it or you don't. Because if you cut it in half, nobody benefits. It's like having a dollar. You know, I'm negotiating for you to have the dollar or for me to have the dollar, and we're trying to convince the side who wants the dollar. Well, you can't split it in half and still have the value of a dollar, right? It's one of us is going to get the dollar, and that's basically how it's going to go. So for that type of negotiation, right, when your seller has to sell at a certain price, then you need to be able to kind of maneuver around it and make it look like it's a win-win scenario. You have to make the other person feel that they're getting value for what they're giving up, which is the dollar. So what is the value that the other person can get? I can tell you as an agent, I usually put the value of, hey, listen, you know, if you can make this thing work, it would be great. You know, my buyer can buy the house, and I will, when we go to settlement, I can make you look good to your seller because I want you to get all the referrals because you did a great job actually negotiating this transaction. That's one way to actually do it. The other way is basically, you know, if I'm the listing agent and actually I'm needing that scenario to happen, sometimes I actually get multiple offers. You know, I'm pretty sure you got run into that situation. Or there's a potential offer coming in. You create a sense of urgency that there's a decision that needs to be made here, and it has to go this way because the only way my seller can move is if they get this amount. I've done that, I mean, many times actually, just even recently, on a property that I had that had actually only one other offer, two other offers. So, but the biggest difference is I was actually using this idea that the seller has to come and walk away with this property, with this amount, because otherwise they're just going to build their house. It doesn't really matter at this point, whether you buy it or not. And you don't win, I don't win, you know. So the win-win doesn't always have to be with the end user, which is the buyer. But remember one thing, the buyer's agent has interest in actually making this happen too, of course, because that's how they get paid. So you push, if who you're talking to, your audience is very important for you to understand what position are they in, what position of interest are they in. And when you understand the position of their interest, then that's what you push. So the natural human behavior, actually, it was actually in this book called Think Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. The notion of people are not rational beings. So looking at it from being a robot or being an animal, we're neither. We're actually in both directions, actually, when we need it, when we want it, how we want it. So we're not always actually going into a particular way of doing things. So when you're looking at rationality, not everything in the world that you can convince somebody on the other side is going to be rational. People will make decisions irrationally. I've had listings where the seller actually wanted more, 15,000 more, when they already very well aware that the property is not going to go 15,000 more, but they still want 15,000 more just because they want to actually push that agenda, or they're trying to be difficult. So for you, your position, you have to actually be assertive, but not aggressive. When I say assertive, is you have to bring your message across why, or the logic across why they should understand, I mean, why they would, why it's not logical for them to be able to sell it for 15,000 more, but at the same time, be able to be not aggressive, saying that you have to make that decision. Remember, the second thing that I was mentioning, the first thing is, you know, look at them, I mean, put yourself in their shoes, and then, you know, kind of reflect back how you speak to the people, to the person that you're speaking on the other side. But the second part is make them feel that they're going to be the one making the decision. See, people can go, typically goes the other way. They usually go the other way if they see that you're pushing a particular agenda, because they feel like they're not in control. So even though it's logical for them to go that direction, but you're dictating to them, they're not going to want to actually do it because you're dictating to them. But if you create the suggestions and give them options, where the only option they're going to end up is that option that you want, by actually making it more enticing for them to go that direction, then they more than likely will make that decision to go that particular direction. So when I say particular direction, the direction you want to go. And hence the basic of successful negotiation is getting what you want, but making them feel that they got what they want, or making them feel emotionally that they got what they want. So it's not always physical that you're going to get what they're going to get what they want, but it can be emotional. And you can apply this to a lot of different things. I apply this to my marketing. So if you guys are actually in the real estate marketing side of it, where you really want to grow your business and you want your marketing to grow, try to understand, if you have goodwill out there with a lot of people will refer business to you. So in order for you to actually get a lot of business, it's almost like negotiating again. When I actually send a text message and an email saying Happy New Year in this past New Year, I'm actually putting out something out there that I thought about you, right? But in a way, if you really think about it, it's also negotiation, because what I'm trying to do is, okay, I thought about you, now think about me, right? I thought about you, I want you guys to go show up to my party, I'm inviting you because you're special, you're great, now think about me. The more you do this to other people, the more people that you're actually doing this to, the more systematic that you do this, the more effective that you're making phone calls and telling them, hey, listen, Happy New Year, how's your family, care about them. It's a negotiation scenario, because now I'm giving them something, right? But at some point, you're going to trigger their conscience or subconscious or whatever you call it in the back of their head, that they feel like, oh my gosh, Mark is a great guy, I want to do something for him. Right? So that's how negotiations work. It's a back and forth dynamic that actually creates this situation. We are all influenced by our own biases in the perception of the world. So when you're sitting down with your listing and you're talking across the board, trying to convince them to list with you, or trying to convince them to take an offer, or trying to actually work with them in terms of what price that we should actually negotiate with the agent, everybody has their perception of the world. So the more you know about the other party, about where they come from, what they're doing, how many transactions are they doing if they're a listing agent, how many buyers are they working with, how many people work with them, the more you know about the other person, the more you understand how important this transaction is to them. And the more important this transaction is to them, the more easier for you to actually convince them to go a direction. You can, if an agent is like high up there and he or she's doing a lot of transactions and have multiple agents working for him, and he's the one personally doing the negotiation, you know what? He's got better things to do, to be honest with you. I mean, because, maybe that's what he put himself to do, but he's got so many things, actually, so many balls, like up in the air. So that's an advantage to you, because at that scenario, you may be able to actually convince him to actually get this thing out of their plate as quickly as possible by doing certain things on the way you write the contract. And also being able to kind of, let them know that you can make it easier for them, and you will make it easier for them. And, the busier the person is, the less time they have to actually deal with every single transaction. So what they want to do is create more an efficient scenario. So that's for some agent that's actually out there doing so many things, right? You want to actually kind of make it easier, quick, and out of the way, because that's the direction that you can see that would actually work and influence them better. Now, for somebody who's new and never done the transaction, that's probably their first transaction, second transaction, let's say, they need the money. So maybe on that kind of scenario, you actually push the subject, hey, you know what, if we can make this thing work, you can actually close a transaction, you can make money, I can make money, we can make this thing work. You can talk about how it could be beneficial for everybody, to actually make it happen. So those are the things that you gotta see in terms of, where you are in those negotiation scenario. So we have feelings and emotion that justifies illogical emotional behavior. This is, by the way, part of this book, so I didn't create this. I'm just giving you an idea, the natural human behavior according to an expert that actually wrote a book about it. So feelings and emotion that justify logical emotional behavior. Well, I tell you what, when you're looking at and you're sitting down with a client, I always tell the people that I train or the people that I mentor, the people I actually coach, listen, if you want to make things happen for your client, okay, you got to understand that people, number one, people can be irrational. And when they're irrational, you got to put them back in a rational state. But you can also work on that irrational state of being and use that same emotion to find them properties that would they fall in love with, or they actually really want to pursue, or they want to go after. So when I'm actually showing houses, I usually like both parties, the husband, the wife, whoever, or the couple or whoever's actually making decisions, to be there when we see the property a lot of the times. Why? Because I don't want this thing to be going back and forth. Oh, I like it and the other person don't like it, or the other person don't like it, but the other person kind of like, oh, well, I'm going to push it this way. Well, if you don't have a party that's together in terms of making decisions, then what you're going to have is a party that could actually bring everything apart. So it's very important that you have all the decision makers in your showing as much as possible. Before you actually make a decision, a direction or the other. Give them time to talk about it and discuss it and iron things out, and to make sure that whatever their decision, I always tell my clients, if you're not 100%, that's not right. Because what you're going to end up having is risking your deposit. You're risking the arguments and all that stuff when pressure starts to build up going to closing. So you don't need to push these transactions. It'll happen if the parties are all in agreement that they want to make it happen. If the couple actually really want to make it happen, then that's one step that you got out of the way. Now you actually got other steps that you need to move forward with. So you got to understand, people make decisions emotionally and then they put logic behind it. It's not the other way around. Maybe business people that actually removes their emotion completely, especially on the buying, let's say buying a building, if it's profitable or not. They're really strictly running numbers, and if it doesn't make sense, they don't go. If it makes sense, they go. They don't care what the building looks like. They probably don't even get to see some of the buildings. I mean, some of the people that are actually in the commercial real estate. So the point I'm trying to make to you is, numbers actually matters more for business people. But for residential purchasing and, for families that are looking to buy a home, for individuals that are looking to relocate, that they're going to personally move into it, you got to understand, you got to get to their core, which is their emotional state of being. And that will make a huge difference in terms of their decision making. So man has two thoughts according to this book. It's actually instinctive and logical. The animalistic side of us and the logical mind. Thought process. And the better way to actually approach this, and they were doing this study apparently before all these, the FBI actually doing hostage negotiations and stuff like that. They were saying they were using the other technique before and it didn't work. Well, it doesn't work because you're dealing with illogical people that are actually robbing banks and doing crazy things, that they're actually so emotionally attached to what they're trying to accomplish, not necessarily logically. So they're making their emotion actually run most of the stuff, and then put rationale behind whatever they're trying to do. Well, with these kind of studies, what they find is that when you connect with that person emotionally and you figure out exactly what triggers their emotions, you have a better chance to actually get the hostages out through irrational, their world thinking of their emotion. So being acknowledged in terms of where their insecurities lies makes a big difference. So I'll give you an example on the real estate side. When you have clients that are actually looking to ask for seller contribution in the crazy market we have right now, where there's like 2, 3, 4, 5 offers, it takes a lot of offers for them to actually, at least I have one client actually, we've been writing offers forever, because I'm actually training them to the point where they don't want to ask for the seller contribution. Because for me to tell them, let's not ask for seller contribution, they'll say, well, you know what, I don't want to use up all my money. Well, then we'll go your direction. Let's go ask for seller contribution. And each time they don't get the property, they're coming closer to the point where they're trying to save up as much money so they don't ask for seller contribution. So if that's what it takes, that's what I will do. You know, that's negotiation with my client. I cannot tell them what to do. I can only have them experience at this point. And then they'll come to a conclusion, you know what, Mark, let's not ask for seller contribution. And I've had that many, many times happen, where clients are actually in the beginning asking me, like, can I get seller contribution? And I tell them, like, in this kind of market, where like 2, 3, 4, 5 offers, in this kind of property, when they already told me there's 5 offers, it's going to be challenging. But of course, if they really have to, and there's no choice because that's the type of loan they have, I'll still go through the motion. But the fact is, it's not, I already know it's not going to go through. My clients already know it's not going to go through. You know, so we're just actually playing this game of writing offers. Well, which is, you know, good practice for the people I'm training for, you know, for writing offers. You know, my agent assistants are actually doing that for me. So the point I'm trying to make is it's very important that you yourself understand that people will be convinced a lot easier if they have to go through the experience. Now, if you don't want to put them through the experience, right, then you have to win their heart that they can trust whatever you say, you know, where they are actually literally like, hey, you know what, Mark, go ahead, do it because I trust you, right? But I still ask them. I mean, because at the end of the day, I told them, unless you're planning to adopt me to your home and actually move me into your house, right, my opinion doesn't really count. So then you're going to make that decision. Because later on, I don't want you to come back to me and say, hey, listen, you told me that I should have bought it this amount. And now look at this. It's a mess, you know, and the market went down and all this crazy stuff happened. And you told me to do this, this, and this. So, in a way, when you're talking to your clients, you have to be not only honest, but you have to be you have to qualify what you say in order for them to not feel that you actually push them to do something. The worst clients you can ever have is the ones that feel like they got pushed into a transaction. Okay? Never, ever, ever have a client feel that they're actually being pushed to a transaction. Imagine yourself in their position, what they would feel, what you would feel if you were being pushed. And number two, wouldn't be much nicer if you're the one making a decision if you were in their shoes? So those are the two very important factors that I actually say that should be part of this negotiation. I have a friend of mine who told me, I mean, I was talking to him this morning, he's like, well, you know, negotiation's about listening, which is basic in any communication conversation. Listening is the number one thing on communication. Number two is you have to be able to make your point across. But that's not enough. That doesn't necessarily will convince the other person to go your direction. The way the other person will be convinced to go your direction is what's in it for him. Why would he want to accept whatever you're giving them? Right? So you got to start thinking that way, and you have to actually understand the background behind that. So, successful negotiation is a dynamic emotional intelligence process. When I say emotional intelligence, actually, the more you learn about emotional intelligence, the more you would understand how you can get what you want from your negotiation. So for a successful negotiation to occur, when I say successful, is you really got what you wanted. To be honest with you, if the other person didn't get what they want, but they feel like they did, I'm happy. I mean, that's exactly what I want. I mean, I want them to always feel that they got what they wanted, but they're not always going to feel that way. But you can make them feel that way. And the way you're going to make them feel that way, like I said to you earlier, is when we're actually collaboratively trying to problem solve, right, the solutions will start to come up. I have a transaction that I went through recently. In a market like this, I was able to drop the price $15,000 and got 3% seller contribution for my client, which is pretty much unheard of in this kind of market. Well, the way it happened is I happen to know the agent. So that's really a plus for me. Because remember one thing, the whole collaborative process is a very, very important stuff. So the more you get to know the other person, the nicer you are. Kindness actually gives you a long, long way. When I say nicer, as in like your tonation of your voice, the way you're polite, the way you speak to the person in a kind manner, the way you kind of look at the facts that not necessarily flatter them, but the facts that you can see that they're actually a good person or a professional person. Those things actually adds up into something that's meaningful. Well, the person that I was negotiating with I happen to know very well. And in the process of negotiating with him, I mentioned to him, I look up to you. And that's one of the things I look up to you. And, that's why I'm looking at this transaction, and I really feel confident that you might be able to make it work. The assumptive approach of putting him on a level where he would want, so I'm essentially stroking his ego without actually him realizing I'm stroking his ego, but he's feeling good about what I'm saying to him. And I said to him, well, Mike, I have a client that's interested in your listing, but how can you make it work for me? That's another thing you got to understand. Open-ended question, put the problem-solving solution to the other side. How can you make it work for me? How can you make it work for my client? Because I really, really appreciate what you've done over the years and the fact that you actually have been successful and you're good at what you do. Can you help me solve this problem? Right? So I tossed it to the other person. And he said to me, well, Mark, if you put a full price offer, we might be able to make it work. I said, but I have an issue here. My client doesn't have the closing costs to make it work. Mark, you can't really ask for a closing cost here because, kind of market we're in, I know, but can we just put the closing costs on the price? It's like, well, Mark, it might not appraise, but from my understanding, it appraised last time. I think it's going to be appraising. You can ask for 3%, but you got to put it on the price. But you cannot take it any higher. So the price went from, I guess, from 460 to 475 or something like that. So 3 weeks later, appraisal come in. It came in at 450. So he's like, Mark, we got a problem here. Appraisal came in at 450. Clients are pissed off at me. They might actually fire me. And I'm like, what can I do? What would you like me to do? Tossed it back to him again. Because I know you have the solution because you've been doing this for such a long time. So now it's actually the pressure's on him to actually find a solution. He's like, well, Mark, I know you have a home inspection. And you're asking for $3,000 for repairs on that inspection. What if you actually forego that inspection and just forget about it? The seller's not going to pay. Okay, no problem. So my client actually got the property at 450 with 3% seller contribution. Point I'm trying to make is, if you want to make things happen for you, right, for your client, you have to understand there is a process that you go through when you're dealing with people, when you're dealing with the other party, when you're negotiating with the other party. But the most important part of the process is understanding the psychology that goes with it, who the person you're talking to, and why would the person do the things that the person would do. And every time you toss the question back out there, they're the ones now thinking what's logical, what's rational, and all those kind of things. I mean, to me, I was only expecting that the price will actually be dropped and then remove the seller contribution. But I was pushing. So, I mean, at the end, basically, my clients are so happy. Referred me 2 clients already I'm working with right now. So this is just very recent. One thing I can tell you, there's this guy named Marshall Rosenberg, can change your life. Actually, he's actually into nonviolent communication. Nonviolent communication is a way for you to actually understand what words mean to people. And there's triggers on certain ways of saying things to people. And when you're actually talking to another person that you're trying to negotiate with, the more you offend them, the less likely you're going to get that contract. The more they feel adversarial towards you, the less likely you're going to get that property. The point I'm trying to make is you have to figure out and really look at the scenario where it's beneficial for you. And sometimes when they tell you no, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's over. It's actually a good starting point when that person tells you no. The reason being is it puts that person in a position of comfort, that they were able to say no to you because that's where they drew the line. So they are actually at that moment in time more open for suggestion of how you can get them to say yes. So a no is on a negotiation, especially when it happens all the way in the beginning, is more than likely more successful than a yes in the beginning, and then the communication continues to a no. By the time it goes to a no, basically towards the end, it's the whole communication is, the whole negotiation is dead a lot of the times. So listening skills are necessary to establish good communication. So that's very important when you're communicating with somebody. So you have to understand that the other person has to hear you or see you or feel that you're listening to them. Not only are you listening to them, that you're empathetic to them and understanding their position. So validation is a very important aspect of it. When someone tells you, you mean this. So what you're saying is this. So until they can explain to you and then you actually repeat it back to them and they feel like, okay, he understands me, that's when the negotiations move to the next level. Because that person now is more open for suggestions. And the more open they are for suggestion, the more likely they will actually receive your suggestion and more likely to either modify a little bit your suggestion or accept your suggestion. So those are very important opening the communication, is be able to actually see exactly how they feel by getting them and validating what they're trying to tell you. Because if they don't feel that you understand them, then they're just going to get frustrated and shut down. And you've seen that in negotiations, I mean, in a lot of things that you have in your life, whether you're negotiating with your spouse or you're actually negotiating with your clients. So, so choose nonviolent words that doesn't trigger defense mechanisms. I'll give you an example. To me, a deal, the word deal, to me is cheap. It makes everything cheap. Because I hear that a lot from dealerships when they're selling cars. You know, let's make a deal, right? If you're going to approach this business, you got to approach this as a more, what do you call this? Consultative approach, where when you're sitting with your client, they feel like you're a consultant, not someone who's going to sell them something. So when you start using deal in a transaction, or you're talking to, yeah, let's make this deal happen kind of scenario, you're cheapening the aspect of how things are actually working. I replace deal with transaction. I don't know if you hear me so many times I say transaction, because I've kind of worked my way through working it in terms of talking to people with certain key words that doesn't trigger that defense mechanism to put up. So that's kind of like, you know, a very important aspect. And you can actually learn that more from the Marshall Rosenberg, the guy, Nonviolent Communication book from Marshall Rosenberg. Very, very good book, by the way. And it'll help you in other things as well, not just in real estate. So, like I said, create an environment to cooperative problem solving and balance behavior of emotional intelligence versus assertive skills of influence. So, put it this way, your assertiveness on making things happen is different than aggressiveness. Aggressiveness tends to rub off on people the wrong way. When I say aggressive, is your tonation of your voice. You know, like an example from that FBI agent that was actually negotiating hostages, he calls it the the FM DJ night DJ approach. You know, when you have that like like, like very calm and very like low voice. He uses that to calm people down when they're his own. But then the words that he's saying or whatever he's trying to convey could be very assertive, but the way he's saying it actually is very calming. So it's very important that your tonation of your voice, that you actually really watch the tonation of your voice. You know, if you're like, yeah, da 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 da, you know, like the way you're speaking, it doesn't matter what you speak or what you say at that point, because people cannot hear it when they get to the point where they want to shut it down, because it doesn't matter what you're saying at that point. It's not even the content that they're looking for. It's the feeling that they don't feel good about talking to you. So that's very, very important, that you have to balance that assertiveness with emotional intelligence, which basically like being able to speak to someone in a calm manner and being able to understand their position and empathetic to them kind of scenario. So you could be empathetic at the same time getting what you want. That's my point, right? So this is my little quote, actually. Clients are influenced emotionally and decisions are justified with logic afterwards. So if you will be talking to clients, you know, kind of rile them up on the emotional sense of everything, and then your influence is going to be much greater on them, because now at some point, basically, since they're emotionally either attached to you, emotional attachment in your realtor is actually the best thing, guys. I mean, you know, it's like little babies actually want to attach to their mom all the time. If you get your clients to attach to you, oh man, it's the best thing, because you can really get them to do what you want, and you can actually get them to where they need to go, and they feel like, oh my gosh, Mark, you're the most awesome person to actually work with, you know. But in reality, of course, you're still awesome, but you know, you just did like what most agents would normally do, which is actually find them a house and negotiate terms and get them to settle them. But they're like raving about you because how they feel about you emotionally. So it's a very important thing to understand. So mastery of negotiation. The number one thing, by the way, if you want to master anything, you got to get right into it, which means you have to not try to avoid negotiation. You got to come face to face with it. That's the number one thing. If you were to be able to talk to somebody, right, and you have fear of actually like getting rejected, right? The first thing you need to do is you need to actually get over that fear. And the only way and the best way to get over that fear is to be able to be in the situation. So put yourself as many times as you can in a particular situation. And I mean, there's facts to this scenario. I'm just not coming up with this. There's a book, Outlier, by Malcolm Gladwell. And he actually talked about the bombings in England during World War II. The whole idea of overcoming fear was most of the fear happened before the bombing. But once the bombing is coming down every day, after the third or fourth day, nobody really cared, right? Because they got used to it. Well, it's the same thing with negotiation. If you actually, in the beginning, you're kind of like not too confident about negotiating or afraid to get into it, you know, with your client because you're new in the business, right? Or trying to negotiate with the listing agent and you're new in the business. Just get it going. Just step right into it, and actually everything else will flow. And that's one thing I've learned, actually, even on the scenario of public speaking. From what I was told, public speaking was one of the hardest things that you get to do outside of fear of dying. But as I went through it, it's the same idea. You just go right into it, and then everything will flow. So if you believe that, then you don't have any feeling of nervousness or fear about anything, or and you come out more natural in that sense. So create a relationship with your adversary. That's another thing that I talked about already. Active listening. Now mirroring is a technique that people use that's very effective. If you look at a child, a little kid who doesn't know anything in the world, he's only like, I have a 9-month-old baby boy, and that boy looks at me, right? If I want him happy, all I got to do is smile at him. I smile enough times and he smiles back, right? So he's essentially, what he's doing is naturally mirroring me. And he's feeling good because he's looking at me and I'm actually showing him, a smile. I'm showing him happy, right? So what he does, he reflects back happy. It's the same thing when you're dealing with and you're negotiating with other parties. If you can actually make it lighter for them and not make it so heavy and bogged down to try to actually negotiate a transaction, it's so much easier for that other person to actually give you what you want. Because at that point, they feel so good about you that they would want to actually continue that feeling. So mirroring is very important for you to actually be able to get that mood of the negotiation to go the direction you want. So that's very, very important. So when you're sitting down with somebody and somebody's leaning back and more relaxed and you're like right up in their face, I mean, they'll feel uncomfortable, right? But if the person's more relaxed and then you're more relaxed because the other person looks like more relaxed, they feel more comfortable because you're empathizing with their style or their emotion, but without even them realizing it. So you kind of connect much better that way. Silences and calm voice technique. I think we talked about the calm voice part, but the silences, I talked to you about that earlier when I was giving you an example. I was quiet for 3 to 5 minutes. The purpose of that is basically it allows time for people to reflect back in terms of what they think is going on that transaction. So silence is communication. It's something that I always say, because when you're quiet, right, the other person allows the other person to think about what you're thinking about. It becomes more like, okay, so what is this person thinking about? Why is this person so quiet? I just said this. Did I say this? Did I not say this? Did I miss something? Why is this person so quiet? So it starts to question themselves. So it's like it allows them to actually like look at themselves in the mirror while you're quiet and saying, okay, what did I do wrong? What did I do right? What could I have done better? So silence is actually communication in that sense, because you're communicating to them for them to communicate to themselves. So it's very important when you're negotiating to understand that silences are okay to have, okay? Tactical empathy, that it talks about that also for mastery of negotiation. The whole idea that you're empathetic and you're showing empathy to someone else. But of course, it's tactical because you're trying to actually get that negotiation to go a certain way. So the empathy is a very important tool for someone negotiating anything, or for you to be able to get what you want in life. Validating, I talked about that. Understanding to gain trust. That's the key, by the way. Once you get the other party to trust you, which is a very, very, very difficult thing. It doesn't always happen in a transaction. But when you get them to trust you, that's actually like you hit that whole golden mark. You hit that target, exactly what you want. I call this position audit. Both of you guys are actually like validating each other and understanding where your position is, and you go back and forth and actually. So what you're saying is this, and then the other person, when the other person starts engaging with you and they start validating you as well, then now you actually have a position audit. You're actually understanding each other's position, and literally auditing and making sure that you are on the same page. Affirmation of the other party, being able to actually understand where the other party is coming from. Place yourself in the other person's shoes, which I talked about, and let them make their own decision, which I talked to you about already. Create a sense of urgency and not accepting your offer like a loss. Looking at it from the sense of urgency. There are moments in time when you need to actually be assertive. And the whole idea is to put certain insecurities on the other party so that they will go the direction you need to go. I'll give you an example. Listen, I know you brought this offer into my office, my property, but my clients are not 100% with the way you actually have presented this offer. It would be better because my client needs this, this, and this to make it happen. Now, the unfortunate part about it is they don't want to make a decision right now. Okay? They don't want to make a decision right now. They said they're going to actually make a decision in 3 days. But in the meanwhile, if you change your offer and no other offer comes in, right, then more than likely we can work together. But if you don't change your offer and a couple of days later comes past and your client might more than likely may or may not get the property, it's a risk that I'm trying to get you to understand. So it's up to you if you want to change your offer. Did I give it to you, the decision? Exactly. So the idea here is to post the decision on the other side of what you want to happen. But what did I do? I create pressure. I created a timeline. By Friday, there might be another offer coming in, and your contract will be kicked out. So that it's very important to actually put that. So the other person say, oh my gosh, Mark, listen, let me talk to my client, get back to you. So by that evening, I mean, the one I just ratified, it's going to actually close next week. The agent bumped up the price, and we're ratified. So my client got what they want. They can't actually, my client is a moving target too. That was the worst part, actually. It's not like, my client is actually, okay, I want 265. And then like 3 weeks later when I get them 265, I thought about it, Mark, I want 275. It's like, they really don't want to sell the house. So we got to the point where like, hey, listen, I got your 275. You don't take this offer, I can tell you right now, more than likely, you're not going to sell your house. And when the market changes, that's your loss. But I'll leave it up to you. Whatever you want to do, right? Offer comes back and ratified. So point I'm trying to make it, even though I put enough pressure, but I know it was going to come back. It was going to get ratified. Why do I know it's going to get ratified? Because I've done this many, many times. I know exactly the psychology of how negotiations work. And that's what you need to understand. The negotiation is what I tell you is experience, right? But sometimes you have to go through that experience to learn negotiation. So at the same time, you could negotiate anything in under the sun. It doesn't have to be a house that you're always negotiating it. So you can practice that way and actually try to apply some of the skills that I'm actually brought up here today. So what does what does successful negotiation look like? It happens when all parties feel heard and understood. Number one. Number two is the perception is reality. So if you get them to perceive that they're winning, that's their reality. But you know what your reality looks like, of course. It's sometimes it's winner take all. You want to actually be the winner and you want to take it all. And you can. And that's the point I'm trying to make. You give a little and you take a lot, as long as everyone feels that it produced an emotional win-win situation. In certain cases, right, when negotiations get to the point where it's actually haggling, you actually keep putting in small inputs and then suggest to the other party what an input might work on their side, but it's much bigger. So I'll give you an example. Let's say the list price is at $350,000, right? And our offer is only $325,000, right? I will offer $330,000 back. The people come back at $340,000, right? Normally you would close that deal, but then I would go offer $331,000. and then actually have them come back at $338,000 or $337,000. And then I'll offer $332,000. And I tell them that's how far my clients can really go. And you see it's kind of slowing down. And then usually by the second or the third offer that's a little tiny bit higher, it goes to the number where I want it to be, which is where my client wants. So it's very important to have these techniques that can help you. So you give a little, you take a lot. And you constantly give inputs to the other party saying like, you know what, this is very difficult. It took me so long to try to convince my client to go this direction. So please do whatever you can. Remember, you have to understand the dynamic works in both ways. If it's a seller's market, you cannot really negotiate price down. It's very rare that you could do that because they have other choices. But in situations where there's not a lot of buyers, there's not a lot of sellers, and it's a buyer's market or it's in between, right? Understand that this negotiation is much easier. Now, the other part of it, if it's a seller's market, then you have to be better at negotiating with your buyer. If it's a buyer's market, then you have to be better at negotiating with the seller. It depends where you are on the table and depends on the market we're in. So negotiation is like I told you, it's dynamic. You have to be able to be fluid, like a chameleon, changing colors in different environment setting. This is the environment that we're in. We're in a seller's market, right? So you have to understand. You have to educate, not only educate, we call it educate, but really you're negotiating with your buyer and letting them know. You can get them to experience the loss. And after a certain amount of loss and a certain amount of sense of urgency, they would actually bump up. Or you actually get them to go through the process of understanding why. So if the monthly payment is the difference, right? Let's say I give you an example on the buyer side. The monthly, oh my gosh, Mark, if I pay $10,000 more, that's a lot of money. Well, then I say to them, well, look at that from a 30-year perspective. How much is that really? Right? It's $1,000 per $7, $6 per thousand, $5 per thousand. It's $30 in this market. So when you're looking at that, you have to understand, you have to see the dynamic of what works. So what is $30 a month to you at this point, Mr. Buyer? If we only get constantly losses and taking up all your time, at some point there's a value to your time, right? So, I mean, if you don't mind actually doing this, all day long looking at houses, I mean, I don't mind too because it's what I do for work. I'm a professional at it. This is what I do. I mean, you're going to be owning a house at some point, and all that time that you spent basically might not even worth that $30 a month that you're paying more if you have to pay $10,000 more. So make it a joint effort to find a solution, which I talked to you about already. Toss the question back out to the other party to make it, to actually kind of balance everything out. So a good negotiator will make you feel that the solution came from you. So a good negotiator will make you feel that the solution came from you. So when I'm looking at a good negotiator, right? Let's say I'm looking at you as a good negotiator. The solution for me is you're the solution. So if I was going to pay you money to list my property, I want to feel that you're the one who made it happen. But in reality, right, I'm the one who came up with the ideas. I'm the one who actually came up with the price, essentially, because I'm the one who accepts these prices. I'm the one who makes the decision, right? But if I feel that you're a good negotiator, then I would feel that the ideas that the fact that this transaction went through is because of you. And you want to make that worthwhile for your clients. The reason being is if your client doesn't feel that your value is there, you're not going to get referrals. You're only going to get referrals if the client feels that the value is there, that you actually gave whatever best that you actually get for the client, that you were able to get the best for your clients. So negotiation is about more on the feeling side of it and the psychology behind how you can make the other person feel. So usually I would take questions, but you have any questions? Okay, but this is a live class. I mean a recorded class. So that concludes my presentation to you guys, and I hope this helped. If you guys have any questions, feel free to send me a message. And that's it. Thank you so much.